Well, I'm super excited to chat with one of my most amazing clients, Alyssa. We worked together for 4 months in my one-on-one relationship wellness coaching program. Actually met Alyssa at a nurse coaching conference, and we just had this like very special connection. So I knew she would wind into my life in some capacity. So excited that I've gotten to support her, and yeah, just excited to hear about your progress in your own words. It's been quite a journey and an amazing one. So thanks for jumping on and chatting with me.
Absolutely. Happy to. I want people to know how amazing you are.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And they're going to see how amazing you are as well. So we will just go ahead and jump in. If you can give kind of just an overview of what your life was looking like prior to one-on-one coaching, what was going on within yourself, what was on in your relationships, and then we'll go from there.
So, I've always been very much into self-development, growing myself, bettering myself as a person. And I've been on that journey since I was like 15 years old. Started reading a lot of good self-help books and actually started seeing a therapist at that time and everything. So, now I'm in my early 30s and I've gotten to know myself so well. And I've learned about all the amazing qualities I have and how much I have to offer others. And honestly, have had, aside from the times that I go into guilt and shame mode, I have a pretty decent relationship with myself, take good care of myself. But when I get into close relationships, particularly romantic relationships, things just fall apart. So before working with you, I've worked with so many different counselors, and then I hired a coach who was fantastic. We had a lot of breakthroughs there just personally. And so I felt like I was growing and I felt like, okay, things should finally be working for me in romantic relationships. And I was dating someone who was the healthiest guy I've ever dated before. Like I finally picked a good man,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the same patterns were repeating. And it was insanely discouraging because him and I started dating in July.
Mm-hmm.
And by December, when I reached out to you, we had already gotten into my old pattern of like every month having some big conflict. And it was so frustrating, probably more than ever before, because after, 15 years of working on myself, I felt like I should be farther along. And I was like, okay, maybe there's just something wrong with me when it comes to relationships and I'm doomed to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I found you in a moment of despair. I mean, I already knew about you,
Yeah.
but there had been another big conflict. And at the end of it, I was feeling so defeated and like just feeling like I'm misperceiving myself because I'm showing up in these relationships or in my relationship at the time in a way that I'm not, it's not who I am at my core.
Yeah.
So I'd seen you posting on social media about your women's relationship wellness coaching. And I was like, maybe I need to do something like this that just specifically focuses on relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I was honestly in a pit of despair when I reached out to you. Like I remember the moment, I remember where I was sitting, I remember how I was feeling. And it was just a really dark place because it felt like my life should be going pretty well because of all the work I'd done, but my relationship just kept tripping me up.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that because I think so many women can relate to the feeling of like, I can achieve success in like all other areas, but like, what the heck is going on in my
Yes.
relationships? I
Yeah.
mean, I know I felt that way too. And I know we're both, nurses also. And I'm like, I've like achieved so much in my career and I'm a good person and I have good friendships, but like romantic relationships, why do I feel like this is a train wreck? And I
Yeah.
think it's easy to feel alone and, that feeling of like, well, something just must be wrong with me. I think so many women hold that somewhere deep inside them, and so that's why I love having these types of conversations too, just so that we can kind of shed some light that other women are not alone in those feelings. And it's lonely and it is dark to get to those places and just feel like, well, something's just wrong with me.
Yeah.
um and obviously from my own story and from the countless women I've supported, sometimes it really takes us getting to like such a low to really push us to say like, okay, like what else do I need, instead of kind of falling into that like, well, this is just what it is. Like that was such an empowering moment for you, I think, like looking back, because you were like, I might be in such a dark spot now, but I'm choosing to explore something else. And I think that's such an amazing quality within you, is you are just like you fall down and you get right back up, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Speaks to your resilience.
I think it was especially it was especially motivating because having found a relationship with somebody who has a secure attachment style and is a good communicator, to
Mhm.
have him tell me that he didn't think the relationship was working and he couldn't continue on in a relationship with someone who talks to him the way I was talking to him and things like that, like setting very clear, healthy boundaries.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm like sitting there in that conversation looking at him like, I'm about to have a really good man leave me behind when I know that deep down I'm a really good woman and I
Yeah.
can be a very loving, kind, uplifting partner. Like I'm the kind of person you want to be in a relationship with,
Yeah.
but I go into these modes where a healthy person literally can't be with me because it's not healthy for them. So
Mhm.
that was really a motivating factor too. Like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, I'm literally being left behind by someone who's healthy when like I'm working so hard to be healthy myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And some in like those eye-opening moments of like, wait a second, it's almost like a little bit of a wake-up call. And I think
Yeah.
different women have versions of that. I know I've had a few versions of my own wake-up calls as well. And I think that what I've seen in this work is, and I think as a relationship coach, like sometimes I even struggle with that title because so many people misperceive that as like you're just helping someone get in a relationship. But this, your example, as well as many of my other clients who are in a healthy partnership, right, with a good person who's communicating and all
Mhm.
the things, you know, if anything, sometimes that relationship is the most challenging because
Yeah.
it's so different. We're not
Yeah.
used to that. So it's going to
Yeah.
like bring everything up. And that's why, I mean, most of my clients are in relationships. And I think that, um, you know, I'm like, I struggle with the title sometimes because I'm like, honestly, if anything, I feel like once you get in a relationship, even more stuff comes up, especially when you've got this healthy partner. Not that you're not healthy, but the healthiest partner you've had kind of mirroring back to you
Right.
your own stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Brings up a lot for sure. And
It
so,
does.
yeah. And, it's also a great example to see like, okay, he's setting these healthy boundaries, like where, I do think that was a mirror to kind of show you like, all right, what's next for me on my personal growth. And, you've done so much work on yourself. And I think that, there's just certain moments of like our healing journey, our growth journey where we're going to be asked to up level. And I think that was definitely a moment for you when you
Yeah,
first reached out.
for
Um,
sure.
so within my support, we do a mix of one-on-one sessions on Zoom, just like this, 60 to 90 minutes once a week. And then in between the sessions, we communicate via an app called Voxer, which is pretty much you can voice note, you can text in there just so that, in between the calls when your life is happening, you have support. And I love that because it also just keeps us super connected. So can you speak a little bit to the sessions, how those were impactful, and then moving into what was helpful with the boxer?
I think Voxer made all the difference for me
Mhm.
because I've done so many one-on-one therapy and coaching sessions before, and they're amazing. But in the past, when I did those, it's like I had to get into the session and then think back, like, okay, this week this conflict happened and this is how it went. And it was just this moment of like, cool, I could have done better, and this is how I'll try to do better next time. And then it wasn't as impactful. I really needed that, like in the moment, please help me figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Um, I used Voxer so much. like
Yeah. You're a
like thank
boxer
you for all
queen.
the time you spent on Voxer with me. Like there were entire days we would be going back and forth on Voxer, but that is that is what I needed. And I feel like that saved my relationship because I was getting so triggered and so emotional, telling myself before something like that happens to, practice the pause and deep breathe and think before you speak and all of that, like
Yeah.
worked sometimes, but when I got that triggered and emotional, it didn't. So being able to jump in Voxer and start messaging or talking to you instead of
Mhm.
immediately reaching out to my boyfriend and going off on him was so helpful. And I'm such an external processor too, to be able to like
Mhm.
talk out what I was thinking and get amazing feedback. And you just really helped me get to the bottom of like, in this moment, why am I so upset?
Mhm.
And then helped me figure out, okay, how do I want to show up in a new way that will transform this situation into a conflict that can bring connection and not so much disconnection like everything that I'd done in the past. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Seriously, like saved my relationship. And
Yeah.
then the sessions were so good because we didn't have to backtrack and talk about conflicts that occurred between our sessions, it was, taking moments from those and identifying triggers and things like that, and diving deep into that in our sessions one on one, where we could look at really, where was this coming from? Like, with my emotions set aside, where was this coming from my childhood? And I feel like in our sessions, I was able to really do a lot of the inner child work that I'd been like previously so opposed to in life.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember you saying that now. I
Yeah.
just remembered,
On our
yeah.
first session, I was like, you were going through everything that we would talk about. And I was like, I really haven't done a lot of inner child work. Like, I probably should, but I've just been really resistant to
Mhm.
it. Like,
Yeah.
hasn't interested me. I just don't want to do it. But ultimately, that was huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes it is the things that we like shy away from ourselves that probably need our most, the most attention.
Yeah.
I just remembered like before, I think it was actually even before I had my business and I was just working on myself. I remember, and I was just like leaning into meditation and stuff. I remember I found an inner child meditation and I put it on and I was like, oh, sure. Like what, I didn't even really know what that meant. And I started
Right.
doing it and like I just got like chills all over my body and I was starting to get so upset and I was like, I'm going to turn that off. Like, we'll just
That's
table
too
that.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny. That was before I even like hired a coach. I was just kind of
That's
like
awesome.
dabbling in personal development. And so, yeah, like, our body will tell us like, oh,
Yeah.
actually, like in some, right, you could choose to ignore it. And then eventually it's like, oh, actually, this probably needs, the more
Yeah.
we want to ignore it, the more attention it probably needs. But yeah, I
Yeah.
love what you shared about, being able to come onto the session and like not feeling like you had to catch me up from everything
Yeah.
that happened because we've been talking, right? And working through things. Yeah. And I think that's why, the breakthroughs, the progress speeds up just because like you're getting that direct support when
Yeah.
things are happening. Um, and I think what you mentioned too, where like there would be times where you would just feel like so triggered and not able to like, work through, right? You said kind of the classic like deep breathing, taking a pause, like, and I think that sometimes women, that brings up shame for women too, when we really feel almost like blinded to what's going on in front of us because
Yeah.
a situation will either remind us of the past or just like, yeah, bring up feelings from childhood that we're not aware of or bring us back to our last relationship where someone was going to cheat on us or something. I'm just throwing out examples like,
Yeah.
and then even though we've got someone brand new in front of us, like our body doesn't know that, our mind doesn't
Yeah.
know that, we go into, a trauma response and, without all of that awareness and then the tools to kind of, regulate your nervous
Yeah.
system in an experience like that, it is really hard, and it definitely takes practice.
Yeah.
And it
For
takes
sure.
having that like sounding board, for me to be like, so like what, what's going on right now, and we were able to dive in. And I think each time there was always some form of tool or
Yeah.
exercise or something that we were leaning into that was personalized to that situation itself.
Yeah. And now I have like a little toolkit. So,
Yes.
the last couple times that any sort of almost conflict arose in my relationship and it was a weekend and you weren't available, I still
Mhm.
have these tools I can use. And it's made all the difference. Like, I was able to get through my last couple conflicts over the weekend
Yeah,
without you. So proud of myself. I
exactly.
could
Yeah.
have
And
done
that,
that. Could have done that months ago.
yeah, and that's, and that's the whole goal is for you to have things to turn to work through. I mean, and it's not even always about, getting it perfectly right, but you're certainly trying. And like I remember many instances where, you would share something would happen over the weekend. I'd come back on Monday, listen to the messages and you had, worked through it and felt like, yeah, you know what? Like we ended up having, I think the communication between you and your partner, that's like what I've really seen improve a lot, like being able to just share more openly with him and not feel like, that shame
Yeah.
and like disconnect. So like that's like a huge like difference that I've seen, in your relationship as well, just that like openness and like it really does allow you to see that like he wants to reassure you, he wants you to feel better, he wants to be there for you. So it's like letting
Yeah.
yourself receive that is sometimes work in itself too.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
So now that we spoke to kind of both types of support, and certainly the one-on-one sessions, diving deep into the childhood stuff and just like, bringing new awareness to kind of carry forward into the week. How has your relationship with yourself improved? What are kind of some of like your biggest wins, biggest takeaways, when you think about the relationship with yourself?
So my relationship with myself has definitely improved. And like I said in the beginning, I had a pretty good relationship with myself until I fell below one of my high unrelenting standards for myself.
Hmm.
Um, so I have more realistic expectations of myself now. And when I do fall short of my goals, etc.,
Hmm.
if I fall into that dark place of guilt and shame, it's easier to come out of it.
Hmm.
So, like, I still struggle, obviously, but I have far more, I have so much more compassion for myself
Hmm.
and a greater understanding of why I think and feel and do some of the things that I do in the present.
Yeah.
The whole inner child work and everything, I feel like I really did connect with little Alyssa and built a safe and secure relationship with her to where it doesn't feel like a disconnect anymore. It's
Hmm.
like I am her and she's become me, and
Yeah.
like we just take on life together. I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes any
I like
sense,
it
but
does.
I don't feel as fragmented. I feel a lot more whole and complete, and I feel a really profound appreciation for myself too because of all the work that I've done and all that I've endured and overcome. And it's it's just this like honor, like self-honoring place now instead of a self-deprecating
Yeah.
place. So even the last couple of weekends, you know, I was struggling a little bit with experiences of depression, which I love how we
Yes.
worded it that way instead of feeling depressed.
Hmm.
And you know, I went into those dark places again and it felt awful, but I was able to climb out of it
Hmm.
and come out of it faster than ever before. And it just feels different. Like my relationship with myself feels different. The world doesn't feel as heavy and dark around me. And I
Hmm.
don't feel like I have to be so perfect all the time.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's
Yeah.
like, it's easier to be healthy. I mean, even all of the like goals and like lists that I have made for myself over the years, it's like it's easier to accomplish them now. I don't know. There's just like this extra weight, and this extra pressure that's off. I'm not
Yeah.
as weighed down.
Yeah. And I think, reflecting on self-compassion, I think it sound like that sounds like such a simple thing, like just be compassionate, but it is
It's
one of
so
the
hard.
hardest. I swear. Like,
It's so
I
hard.
think like it really has to be up there with one of the hardest things because like it is so easy for us, especially as women, we're naturally like nurturing and caring for others. And I feel like that's ingrained in our blood. So, it's so easy for us to be compassionate with other people, but it is so hard to reflect that back to ourselves. And it's like, you know, when we find ourselves in these moments of like being super hard on ourselves or being compassionate, like I've had many clients be like, it just feels so weird and unnatural to be like,
Yeah,
say something kind to myself right now. I don't want to do that. And it's like, we have to ask ourselves the question, like, what would I say to someone I loved in this situation? What would I say to my
right.
best friend? Would I ever speak to them the way I speak to myself? Of course not. So why
Yeah,
am I doing this to myself? Why don't I deserve what I give others? And it's such a big question. And I think it's just something that will kind of always be a practice of coming back to because it's easy to go to the judgmental side or just be like, oh my gosh, you like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you be better? And I think a reminder I always give myself if I find myself in, that type of mindset is like I just picture the two roads, the compassionate road or the judgmental road. And it's like, I know the judgmental road is not getting me anywhere. It's just stunting me and hurting me.
right. Yeah,
So even if it feels weird and even if I don't feel like I deserve it, like I'll just choose the weird, the weird road and just
yeah.
like
Why not?
until it feels natural, and I've definitely come far with it. I know you've come far with it. And I
Yeah,
think like a big takeaway we're kind of identifying, in this convo too, is like the goal isn't perfection. And like, you know, it would just be unrealistic to be like, oh, and then I was never sad ever again in my life, or I was never down again. I mean,
yes, yeah.
life is hard and
Hard.
relationships are hard, and relationships will forever be a mirror for what is going on within ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think that you're learning that. And I think many women are being asked to learn that right now, to kind of let go of that fairy tale we had from growing up of like we'll just get in a
Right.
relationship and then everything is happy and sparkly and like and it can be and it is, but like it's also going to bring some stuff up.
Right.
In particularly the childhood stuff. And I love what you shared about like, kind of merging with her and like taking on life together, because really like that is such a gift we can give ourselves, is to kind of go back for our inner child, and just validate them and give them, the love that they didn't feel they got, even if our parents had good intentions. And it's not about blaming our parents or shaming our parents. It's just that as a child, we can only perceive things a certain way.
Yeah.
And only you know how you felt in those moments and those experiences. So only you then can kind of go back and like reassure her and take her with you and let her know she doesn't have to feel these ways anymore. So
Yeah.
it's super
think
powerful.
I think another thing that has helped my relationship with myself too is now being able to receive from
Yes.
others, and especially from my romantic relationship. I mean, historically, I was the overgiver, trying to earn
Mm-hmm.
love and affection. Like I'm going to be the best girlfriend ever, and I'm always going to be a good girlfriend, and like I'm going to
Yeah.
give and give and give and give, but not really receive much and not expect anything, honestly. Um, Now I see myself as an equal partner, and I see myself as like worthy of receiving and capable of receiving. So not only will I receive, whatever love and affection comes my way and be like nurtured by it, but I can now speak up too and ask for my needs and
Yes.
for ask for my needs to be met. If it's, obviously I do a good job of meeting my own needs, but I'm learning like it's not codependent to have, ask for
Yes.
things sometimes. So like
Yes.
that's changed too. Like actually having, the most important relationship in my life being one that can pour into me and fill me and not just be one that I give all of myself into and wind up empty. That's
Yeah.
been huge because now I have like a mutually supportive partnership and not just a drain that I pour myself into, hoping
Yeah.
that maybe I'll get enough love in return to feel good, yet actually not even receive any of the love that I'm given.
Yes.
So that's been huge too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up. Receiving is like another thing that's so challenging because we're just so used to giving as
Yeah.
women too. And then it's like, yeah. And then taking a look at what's the intention of all this giving? Like, because
Yeah.
yeah, it's good to be caring. It's good to give and, you know, give energy out, but is the intention so that I can feel good enough, or so that I can feel worthy of love, or so that I can feel like I've earned the relationship? Or is it just because like that's the person I am? And I also know that, that's a two-way street, and like I will give, I can receive. But I think as women we tend to drain ourselves and then like struggle to receive. I mean, even a compliment, like how many times like as women do we like brush off compliments? Oh no, I look
Right.
like crap today or something. It's like,
Yeah.
let's just let it in, we can. So yeah. And I think too, I know we did a lot of work around like bringing awareness to what are your needs, in your relationship, and just within life, within yourself, how to meet those needs. And then most importantly too, how to ask for what you need, because oftentimes I think, and I know this has happened to me so many times, like just so much is going on, but like we don't even know what to ask for, and then we just want our partner to know, but we don't
Yeah.
know how to communicate it because we don't even know ourselves. And so like starting with what do I need, like, and feeling open enough and feeling comfortable with vulnerability enough to be like, hey, it would really help me if you could give me some reassurance, for example, or if you could let me
Yeah.
know this, or if you could come over and just like spend some time with me, or, whatever it may be. So it's
Yeah.
like our needs will only be met if we ask, and if we don't ask, we can be sure they won't. So
Yeah.
awesome. So, and let's kind of shift into your relationship. So there's been massive shifts there. How has the relationship with your partner improved since coaching?
I mean, in every way. um, I mean, it's really hard to pinpoint
Yeah.
exactly how, but that cycle of conflict
Mhm.
appears to have been broken. Like
Yeah.
I think it's gone. I think it's over.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like I have a couple months under my belt where I could say that. And anytime it looks like some sort of conflict is going to arise now, it's able to be managed before it goes
Mhm.
too far.
Yeah.
Even if it's hard. Like this weekend, it took like 4 hours to muddle through like what we were trying to say to each other and get to a good place. But after those 4 hours, we were good. We moved on with our day. And we're actually closer from it, not going our separate ways, sad, angry, contemplating ending the relationship. So, um, I mean, I would get so triggered by things and deep down know like I shouldn't be this mad about this. And then, be beating myself up while being mad and hurt about the situation and then getting self-protective and then getting angry. I mean, I would turn downright like hateful and
Mhm.
spiteful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd made some progress. And by the time I got to this relationship, I wasn't as volatile, but like, I mean, I would still just say terrible things that I would never say. And honestly, wouldn't even think or
Mhm.
or feel when I'm not in that triggered state. So like the fact that that has not happened in a
Yeah.
while is a huge breakthrough for me because that's what destroyed all my other relationships or just kept them on an
Mhm.
unhealthy path because my partner would do the same thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the fact that those big blow up conflicts don't happen and we're not in that cycle is
Yeah.
huge. So just eliminating that has been great. But then being able to, in the absence of that, add in times where we can have good conversations, even if they're uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and we can find ways to connect and like just being able to have a more balanced relationship,
Yeah.
like I was talking about earlier, where it's an equal partnership. It's just healthy. Like it's just a healthy and happy relationship. We both like it, even when it's hard and we
Yeah.
like have our doubts or miscommunications, we're always able to come out stronger on the other side now.
Yeah.
Instead of be sitting on my couch wondering if we should break up because I said so many terrible things like, how does he forgive me? Or he does forgive me, but how do we move on? So we're just in a very much different place than we were,
Yeah.
4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's been night and day. And I remember even reading when we first started working together, that was like one of your main goals is like, how do I break, this cycle? Knowing that you
Yeah.
already had, like you said, you've made progress on your own, but like really wanting that cycle behind you.
Hmm.
And I want to point out too what you said about being able to feel closer after conflict. And
Yeah.
that is like such an incredible, I don't know if I want to call it skill or just outcome. I mean, if we think about conflict, or it doesn't even have to be conflict, truly just like uncomfortable conversations where you have to
Yeah.
maybe
That's what it
share.
is now more so.
Yeah, like, and I think I mean, these are necessary in a relationship. This is going to happen. And I think that many people in relationships can revert to avoiding uncomfortable conversations, even if it's just like, hey, you really hurt my feelings when this happened, or hey, I noticed when you did this, I started to, I took it really personally, I felt this way, like, can you let me know, like, what did you mean by that? It would help me feel better. Like, even, that sounds simple, but it's hard for a lot of people to like feel safe enough to like open up, or to feel
Yeah.
like, that they can rely on someone else to kind of help them feel better. And so I think, naturally, I think conflict can disconnect a lot of partners. And like if there's a fight, then and it's totally okay to take space. I'm not discounting that,
Right.
but I think that if the outcome is that you feel disconnected and not connected, then there's just opportunity, to
Yeah.
work through communication, like work through on your own end. Like, what do you do when you feel triggered? Like, are you numbing out with, alcohol or shopping or food or whatever? Or are you like taking a look at these, deeper feelings and processing them so that you have the awareness and you can speak to how you feel from a grounded place.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just think that's such an incredible win that you guys, I mean, you have just been able, and I've just seen it time and time again, you've been able to navigate these uncomfortable combos. And like, yeah, it's not like it has to feel super great. And yeah, like maybe it's, a little bit of a windy road, but you guys come out the other side closer and with more understanding and empathy for each
Yeah.
other too.
Yeah. It's
So
really it's really fantastic. And
yeah.
he can attest to just the wild amount of change. And I remember this was something that I was so troubled by when we first started working together is he had told me, I believe you can change, but I don't know if you can do it fast enough.
I
I
remember
totally
that.
did it fast enough.
You did, and then
And
some,
like
yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. I don't think either of us were expecting me to have this like super rapid transformation. He definitely wasn't. And now he's like he's like, I love Jennie. It's like I love Jennie. She's amazing. He's like, you're such a different person.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, I think even taking a look at that statement too, it's like, I think that it's less of that you're different. I think it's like you're more who you actually
Yeah.
are, like, and
Exactly.
I think that's what this work does is it brings out like, who are you at your core? So like,
Yeah.
even to anyone watching too, it's like, the names we call ourselves and like the way we feel about ourselves, like, is that
Yeah.
actually who you are on the inside,
Yeah.
or are these just like ways of being because they're protective mechanisms or just
Yeah.
like learned behavior, whether we've seen it modeled to us or we've just like adapted in certain ways that aren't healthy.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, I think it's really powerful that you're more yourself. And
Yes.
like, even that you said at the beginning, of course, you're an amazing, a loving, kind, beautiful person inside and out. You're a nurse, you take care of pediatric patients, like, you're an amazing person. And like, you have so much to offer yourself
Yeah.
and others. And so it's like actually feeling like you get to be you instead of,
Yeah.
you
It's
know,
so nice.
yeah, showing up in ways that, and I think that's why that guilt and shame that would show up for you would feel so loud, because it's like it's a disconnect from who you
Yeah.
actually are, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it really isn't so much that I've changed. It's just like I've been revealed.
Yes.
Like, hey, this is who I've been. Like when we're not in a conflict, this is who I am over here. Just,
Yes. Yeah,
now
it's like,
now I'm not being misrepresented by the way I would show up when I'd get triggered and basically just have like a temper tantrum of a child,
mhm.
just wanting needs to
Yeah.
be met and having all these fears and all the self-protective stuff and all the
Yeah.
ego stuff that came up. Like being able to lead with love and connect from an open heart has been, I think that's made all the difference because yeah,
Yeah.
now I just get to show up who I am. And I still I still have moments where I'm not the best. I'm
Yeah.
definitely not the
Like
best and not the
everyone.
greatest, but
Yeah. Yep.
but it's not as big of a deal. Like
Yeah.
it's like, okay, she misspoke. Okay, she made a mistake. Oh, she had a bad attitude for a few hours. Like,
Mhm.
but she's still this other person that I
Exactly.
don't know. Yeah, it's just it's cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember like the work that I've done on myself too. I remember being like, oh, I've transformed. And that's like a word that I love. But then I did have to remind myself too, like, have I transformed, or like actually underneath all of these unhealthy patterns and coping mechanisms and, showing up as, my inner child, that, and a lot of
Yeah,
people don't realize they're doing that. So I love just, your openness and vulnerability on this call too, just to be like, yeah, I've shown up in these ways because you at least you have that awareness, so you can do something about it, whereas like many people could show up in these ways but have no clue, like, oh, I'm actually just showing up this way because it reminds me of how my dad used to make me feel or my mom used to make me feel, even if
yeah,
they didn't mean it. Like, the awareness is just everything, and that's why I think like even just being able to speak about all of this in such like a calm, open way, it's like, yeah, I know what my patterns are, I know what my
yeah,
triggers are, and guess what, I have the tools to like navigate life, with myself, with my partner. And I know when you mentioned too the aspect of like, I know you had felt at times a little bit of pressure around like, am I gonna like grow and heal this like fast enough, right? And I know
hmm
that was something that we worked through too, because I'm like, well, if you're pressuring yourself, like that's gonna be harder. Like, let's
yeah,
just kind of like surrender to this path. And I feel like once you did that, um,
yeah,
things just aligned from there
yeah,
in a
yeah,
quicker way. So
absolutely.
yeah, your transformation has blown me away. And one of my favorite things, or not favorite things, but just one of the things that I'm just like constantly blown away by, is just like your dedication really to like yourself, to the work. And I know even sometimes I'm like, let's like incorporate some play or like some lightness too, because sometimes this work can feel so like I've got to do all these things. And but you're just so, it just speaks to like your dedication, and like I know like we're even continuing to work together now in like not in my I guess highest touch offering, because you really don't need that. We don't need a call every week. But we're continuing, with some Voxer support. And yeah, so I know that over these next few months too, I mean, I can't even imagine the combo that we'll be having
Yeah,
just about your progress at that point too.
Yeah, it's been
So
awesome.
yeah. So the last question, why would you recommend, other women invest in themselves in this way, in their healing and their personal development?
It's just made everything better. I mean, yes, my romantic relationship, definitely my relationship with myself, but my whole relationship with the world is
Yeah.
different. Like, I don't know. I mean, I really had reached such a place of devastation. Like
Mhm.
nothing else was working, and I
Yeah.
could not seem to get unstuck from these relationship patterns.
Yep.
And our relationship wellness is so important. I mean, we're not meant to live alone in a silo, you know.
Mhm.
If you have healthy relationships around you, I feel like it just exponentially improves your quality of life and your enjoyment of life. So being able to address whatever you need to address within your own self so that you can have a healthier relationship benefits you, benefits the other people. I just I think it's the best thing you can do. Like I love that I finally got to work with someone solely around relationships.
Mhm.
And in that process too, like thinking I was just going in, like figuring out, how to have a healthier romantic relationship. I also learned to have a healthy relationship with myself and everything else around me. Like, I don't know. I think it was perfect and perfect timing too,
Yeah.
especially on after all of the other work I've done. It
Mhm.
was just so beautifully fell into place. So anybody who's struggling with anything, I mean, we all have triggers, whether you have like major traumas from your life or just like you've just been a human. I mean, I think any sort of work you can do on yourself and your relationships is going to make your life so much better.
Yeah, I love I love everything that you shared, and like I think that and it's so common because when women reach out to work with me, it typically is like, hey, I'm having these issues in my relationship, like, in
Yep.
my partnership, or,
Yep.
for the single women that I support, it's okay, I've had all these patterns with all these partners, like now I'm single and like, what do? I don't want this to repeat.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like I feel like the main two buckets of women I'm supporting in relationships. But for the women that I support that are in partnerships, it's like their concern is typically the main concern is typically all of this is happening in my relationship. But I love what you shared, like, not only did I work through that, but I was able to connect deeper to myself and understand myself more because it's all connected because our relationships are mirrors for ourselves. So I think like, and I know in other interviews that I've done like this too, I've had past clients say the same thing. I can think of one in particular. She's like, well, I thought everything was just stuff with my husband. And then I actually realized, like, oh, I actually, when I did the independent work on myself, like that got better. Like, it's like a side effect, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, I love what you said too. Like, we're not meant to be alone, right? And like, we're meant to connect and having healthy relationships, even, like friendships too. I know we didn't like speak about friendships, but I think just like relationships in general, how to have healthy boundaries with family members, how to, have healthy friendships that lift us up, how to have romantic relationships that are supportive. I mean, it really does speak to, yeah, the quality of our life. Because if we're feeling crappy around people, or every time we go home we feel like crap with family stuff because we don't have boundaries, and then we have a partner who we feel like we can't open up to, or we have friends that give more than, or that take more than they give. I mean, you add all of these things up and it feels lonely, which is
Yeah.
the opposite of what we're meant for.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
So, well, I appreciate everything that you shared, Alyssa. I love you. You're amazing.
I love
Just
you
like,
too.
yeah, I love supporting you. And like, I know it was all just meant to be.
Yes.
Um, so I just thank you so much for being super open and just sharing your story because I know that it will help other women. And yeah, so thanks for being you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, you're welcome.